This primetime presentation was both clear and it was compelling, the first in a historic set of hearings here.
This is not just about what happened on January 6th or in the days leading up to it. It's about a clear and present danger to our democracy.
I have to say, it's just historic to me. This was a hearing unlike any other.
I think the committee did a great job tonight. I thought Liz Cheney was particularly strong.
It was a very powerful, very well produced, if you will, 2-hour presentation.
Tonight, the January 6th committee concluded the first of a series of its public hearings, and the point was abundantly clear. Our democracy remains in danger.
But I think for something like this to happen, to have an attack on the Capitol, to have an attack on our democracy, to have a president of the United States saying that he won the election when he didn't, I think that is more important than anything. If you don't have a functioning democracy, then it doesn't matter if you have a penny gas prices. You don't have a functioning democracy. And people are going to think, well, what does this matter for gas prices or whatever? Okay, fine, we'll get to the gas prices. That's always going to happen. What does this mean for inflation? Fine, we'll get to that. We talk about that all the time. Yeah. What this means for our democracy is the most important thing, and that's what we should be focusing on.
Before I begin, I want to say a few words very briefly about the January 6th hearings that were highlighted last night. The insurrection on January 6th, one of the darkest chapters in our nation's history. A brutal assault on our democracy, a brutal attack on law enforcement, some losing their lives, and we heard about it last night again. To know together, and I mean this, we can unite and defend this nation, Democrat and Republican. Allow no one to place a dagger at the throat of our democracy.
Everybody sees how fake this is. Nobody is convinced by it. It was just 2 years ago, live on television, summer of 2020, a mob of Biden voters tried to storm the White House. Remember this? They torched a church across the street. They attacked Secret Service officers. A mob called for the President of the United States to be lynched. He was taken to an underground bunker for his safety. We don't like to be hysterical, so we kind of downplayed it at the time. Probably shouldn't have. Maybe we should have been as hysterical as Joe Biden. This is Pearl Harbor. But that would have been lying, so we didn't. This is what our country's capital looked like at the time.
Very good, man. Come on. You gotta do this, man.
Stop lying to us. Stop telling us things that we know for a fact are not true because we watch them in real time. You didn't hear anything about that last night, about similar riots that destroyed cities all over the United States. You didn't hear a single word. None of that was a dagger at the throat of our democracy. All of it happened in an election year with the aim of influencing the election. Unmentioned. You heard not one word about the guy who just tried to assassinate a Supreme Court justice at his home at the urging of the Senate Majority Leader. Can't talk about any of this. These topics, like the state of the U.S. economy, are now off limits.
The world is being taken over by a handful of business powers who dominate the natural resources we need to live while controlling the money we need to obtain these resources. The end result will be world monopoly, based not on human life, but financial and corporate power. And as the inequality grows, naturally more and more people are becoming desperate. So the establishment was forced to come up with a new way to deal with anyone who challenges the system. So they gave birth to the terrorist. The term terrorist is an empty distinction, designed for any person or group who chooses to challenge the establishment. This isn't to be confused with the fictional Al-Qaeda, which was actually the name of a computer database for the US-supported Mujahideen in the 1980s. In 2007, the Department of Defense received $161.8 billion for the so-called global war on terrorism. According to the National Counterterrorism Center, in 2004, roughly 2,000 people were killed internationally due to supposed terrorist acts. Of that number, 70 were American. Using this number as a general average, which is extremely generous, it is interesting to note that twice as many people die from peanut allergies a year than from terrorist acts. Concurrently, the leading cause of death in America is coronary heart disease, killing roughly 450,000 each year. And in 2007, the government's allocation of funds for research on this issue was about $3 billion. This means that the U.S. government in 2007 spent 54 times the amount for preventing terrorism than it spent for preventing a disease which kills 6,600 times more people annually than terrorism does. Yet, as the name terrorism and Al-Qaeda are arbitrarily stamped on every news report relating to any action taken against U.S. interests, the myth grows wider. In mid-2008, the U.S. Attorney General actually proposed that the U.S. Congress officially declare war against the fantasy. Not to mention, as of July 2008, there are now over 1 million people currently on the U.S. terrorist watch list. These so-called counterterrorism measures, of course, have nothing to do with social protection, and everything to do with preserving the establishment amongst the growing anti-American sentiment both domestically and internationally, which is legitimately founded on the greed-based corporate empire expansion that is exploiting the world. The true terrorists of our world do not meet at the docks at midnight or scream Allah Akbar before some violent action. The true terrorists of our world wear $5,000 suits and work in the highest positions of finance, government, and business. So, what do? How do we stop a system of greed and corruption that has so much power and momentum? How do we stop this aberrant group behavior which feels no compassion for, say, the millions slaughtered in Iraq and Afghanistan, so the corporatocracy can control energy resources and opium production for Wall Street profit? How do we stop a system of greed and corruption that condemns poor populations to sweatshop slavery for the benefit of Madison Avenue? Or that engineers false flag terror attacks for the sake of manipulation? Or that generates built-in modes of social operation which are inherently exploitative? Or that systematically reduces civil liberties and violates human rights in order to protect itself from its own shortcomings? How do we deal with the numerous covert institutions such as the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg Group, and other undemocratically elected groups which, behind closed doors, collude to control the political, financial, social, and environmental elements of our lives? In order to find the answer, we must first find the true underlying cause. For the fact is, the selfish, corrupt, power, and profit-based groups are not the true source of the problem. They are symptoms.